hold music. You want to avoid it, and so do your customers. So say goodbye to hold music and hello to faster, smarter support with Salesforce. Make service more personal and agents more productive using built-in trusted AI. Then watch costs and wait times drop and satisfaction soar. Support customers in a whole new way with Service GPT. Learn how at salesforce.com/servicegpt.
Welcome to nature-backed podcast of Single Earth. In this podcast, we are talking with investors about their vision of the new green world. My name is Tarmo Virki, and in this episode, I am talking with Rainer Sternfeld, founder of PlanetOS and now partner at Nordic Ninja. Enjoy the show. Thanks, Rainer, for finding time to speak with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a few words about the investment fund, the Nordic Ninja. It sounds rather cool, but how was the fund founded?
Right. So Nordic Ninja is currently the most active Japanese VC in Europe, and this story goes back to 2018 when the idea in Japan was floated. And the idea is that Japan has a very strong kind of history when it comes to innovation, but that's now been kind of stagnant for 30 years or so, and particularly when we think about digital economy. And to invigorate that, they started a fund called World Innovation Lab in Palo Alto, which is run by my good friend Gen Sayama, and that's the bridge between Japan and Silicon Valley, but they obviously make investments elsewhere, including TransferWise or Wise today. And then they were looking to create a similar fund elsewhere. And that elsewhere, that focus became the Nordics and the Baltics, or the Baltic Rim, as kind of hotbed for innovation. And since I was traveling to Japan, at the time I lived in California, I founded a company called PlanetOS, which I will tell you later a little bit about. And then I was in California and was in Japan, traveling to Japan every month or so. And I got a call just to ask for some advice. Mm-hmm. And kind of that simple advisory in terms of what to do in the Nordics and the Baltics and why this is a great area. Of course, you should invest. That turned into an offer. And since we had been there for 8 years in California, and my family, my kids had never lived in Estonia, then we decided to take on this opportunity and landed here on this planet a few months before COVID. So great timing. So the fund today is a 100 million fund, all backed by Japanese capital. We have investors like JBIC, Panasonic, Honda, and Omron. Despite the names, we are a super fast financial VC focused on new Nordic startups, which are building digital infrastructure for sustainable transformation. That's how you would put it in a nutshell. We do focus on in the stages of Series A, Series B, but predominantly all of our stuff is in Series A. That's when we feel comfortable to get in, and that's when we feel that we can provide the most value to scale globally. So the idea there is that we look for number one teams in the world who just happen to be here in the new Nordics, because all these 8 countries where we can invest in, the total population of those countries is about 33.5 million. It's about a third of Japan or 10% of the US. And so if you're in that type of a situation, you don't look at countries or very specialized markets like, I don't know, products for left-handed fishermen. You're looking for the absolutely best teams, management teams in the world in their segments who just are originated from here or are here or a version of that. So that's Nordic Ninja, and today we have 18 companies in our portfolio, and 4 of them are unicorns today and more to come. And so that's kind of the fund in a nutshell. And maybe it's important to say that our team consists of half of them are Japanese and half of them are non-Japanese. We have different Nordic people on the team.
How do you define this sustainable transformation?
The way we look at it is since I have built and been involved in sustainable technology or technologies that are driving sustainability or sustainable transformation, I have a pretty strong filter for BS. So what we look at is actual net impact. So that doesn't mean that when we look at a company that doesn't look or smell or act like a climate tech company, that we don't look at it from the point of view of what kind of an impact does it have. We still look at it. So, for example, one of the best examples of that is an Estonian company called Veriff, which even themselves, when I talk to Karel, which is in our portfolio, they don't think about themselves as a climate tech company in any way, but they rank the highest in our system when it comes to digital infrastructure and sustainable transformation, because they are building digital infrastructure you don't see. They can be used by every human on the planet, or at least have the potential, without themselves knowing about it, because ID verification is important. And by providing that system, they're not just making ID verification like 10%, 20%, whatever, more efficient. Just they're getting rid of all the travel, all the crap that you have to go through just to get yourself verified. Like if you're an Estonian living in Columbus, Ohio, and you need to get yourself verified, you need to go to, you used to go to New York or DC or San Francisco or LA and take take a plane. And so that's something you can completely forego with Veriff. And so that's obviously why it's ranking super high. And people will obviously understand this. It doesn't have to be marketed like some sort of a climate tech company, but it clearly has a massive net impact. And that's how we look at all companies in that sense. But we obviously have companies that are head-on tackling this type of problem set. For instance, one of our portfolio companies is ClimateView. It's a Stockholm-based company that grew out of a collaboration with the Swedish Climate Board by an applied mathematician, founded by a applied mathematician, or one of the founders, and Tomer, who is the driving force behind the company. They created a climate action toolkit for cities. And if you think about cities are a massive kind of a sustainability stack, if you think about it. And when cities are creating their environmental policies, if you want to go through with that, you need money. You need to invest, whether you want to improve public transportation, get cars off the road, get more bikes, build more parks, go towards renewable energy. All of that stuff needs money, and banks are ready to issue these green bonds, but then they need accountability tool. Like where is that accountability tool? And of course, that's where ClimateView comes in. So cities can use ClimateView to plan their policies, to see what one or the other policy measure will have the most impact. And then also when they enforce those policies or roll out those policies, then they can also measure and track their progress. And then the lenders of the green bond issuers can see what's going on. So it's on one hand a climate action toolkit, and on the other hand, it's also an accountability tool. And to me, it's really like a tool for democracy, and it's engaging politicians in actually doing better. It's incentivizing them to do better. So it's a win-win for everybody. So we have companies like that are head-on, focusing on environmental policies using technologies and embedded into all the data collection and modeling and all that stuff as well. And as the same with Veriff, with each policy that is being run in the ClimateView system, the system learns and gets better because it looks at the results on the other side of the equation. So the more cities they have, currently they have 120 cities that are using Climate View around the world. The more cities in a row, the better the tool becomes. So as simple as that.
Very cool. You referred already to PlanetOS story. If we take the history 10 years back, roughly, right, when you guys came out with a PlanetOS, I think it was probably one of the first, at least definable as a climate tech companies in the region.
Yeah, maybe. I didn't think about it at the time like that, but PlanetOS was originally founded as Marine Explorer and grew out of a data buoy company which we built as a side project for Caltech that helped the Caltech Marine Systems Institute to measure phytoplankton concentration in the Finnish Gulf. Super academic, super important too, because it allowed them to understand how the herring moves, and that's important as well because the Finnish Bay is filled with heavy dissolved metals. The entire Baltic Sea is not just the Finnish Gulf. And so we created Marine Explorer to build the world's first big data platform for ocean data, and it became massively popular among the entire marine community around the world, not just academics, whatever, data scientists, maritime companies, energy companies, what have you, insurance companies. But then it grew into PlanetOS because there was a big demand in how do you even deal with large-scale disparate data sets that are either satellite data or some climate models or some time series sensor data or whatever. And so we created what we would call a virtual database on top of all the other databases that didn't really interoperate together. And then that would allow you to really quickly find and create data sets and then a set of APIs so that you can attach your analytics to it. So it was a kind of a middleware, if you will. And we patented it, and it's today being used by who is who of this world, from private to public, like NASA and so forth. But then private, from oil companies to renewables to whoever. So the way we found our kind of growth was through renewable energy, particularly offshore wind farms. We had a bunch of different projects, which obviously initially created some revenue, but none of them really grew. And so with offshore wind farms, we found our perfect product market fit. And the problem there was that, in any given bigger wind farm, you have a dozen systems that feed data into the control rooms, and all that data comes in different systems. And so we had to integrate all that together in a Bloomberg style view, so that people in the control room would have the same understanding as people in the boardroom. That's the way the pitch went. And that worked. And so in a short 2 years, we had over 160 wind farms integrated into the system. And in 2017, in August, we got acquired by a company called Intertrust, which was also our investor. And then Intertrust is the inventor of digital rights management. And of course, since that had become commoditized in the world of music and movies and all that, we are in a world today, which is not surprising at all, 5 years later, that data is property, and we have GDPR, and if data becomes property, it needs to be managed. But what about our rights? Like our citizens equitable in when their data is used for some other business purpose? Normally we don't get paid. We are the product. If the product is free, if the service is free, you're the product. And that, of course, was something that was okay maybe in ad tech or whatever, but not certainly okay in energy. And when you think about European countries, which are super sensitive about it, then we found a lot of traction there. So the next 2 years after the acquisition, I lived on an airplane, traveling the world, meeting power companies around the world who would be building smart home systems or grid management systems, or trying to understand the feasibility of solar wind farms or electric car charging networks or whatever. And back in the day, I actually, before PlanetOS, I helped ABB to design the nationwide fast charging network for electric cars in Estonia, which became again the first in the world, 2011. And so I took all these experiences and we sold the PlanetOS kind of a system to power companies for a various degree of different projects. And then from there on, natural next step was insurance companies. Insurance companies that have premiums and you need to use data to create more precise parametric insurance policies.
Do you see I was speaking recently with somebody from our region who was kind of saying that not much is happening or very little is starting to happen only in climate-related startup field in the whole Eastern Europe. I mean, was PlanetOS was probably one of the first, related companies, but are you seeing now more traction to this whole sector? I think probably defining the sector is, one of the challenges, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, there are really two questions that you're asking. One is this a sector on its own, or is in my view, digital infrastructure and sustainable transformation, as we like to look at it here, are kind of like filters, like good practice, like sustainability equals profitability in our point of view, and digital infrastructure is the only way you can become competitive, right? So like Bolt is a transportation company that's leveraging technology, right? Or Wise is a financial company that's leveraging technology. So we have self-driving algorithm companies that in Sweden and Finland both that rank quite high on sustainable transformation, because when you look at how much can their technology help to decrease the carbon footprint compared to the status quo, then it's pretty high, but it doesn't look like a climate tech company. So, but in general, if you look at companies like Single Earth, of course, your company, and Climate View that I described, that are head-on looking at bigger picture, like let's say, carbon capture or green energy or environmental policies. That as a sector, obviously, it's in an infancy, and not only here in northern and eastern kind of Europe, it's still in its infancy everywhere, because many of them are good as a slow growing business, family business consultancy, but very few of them have become really category defining companies that are changing everything the way we look at it. So but I'm to answer the first part of your question, yes, I'm seeing definitely an upwelling of those types of companies, and it's clear that the younger generation, they want to work on something that's more meaningful, and you can induce change when the incentives are right, as we see with many companies in our portfolio as well. Like a company we have in our portfolio is called Logmore. It's out of Jyväskylä originally, now it's in Helsinki and San Francisco. Super exciting company because they have invented a very small postmark size data logger that you can put on airplanes because it doesn't have any radio or Bluetooth in it. And so when you attach those data loggers to sensitive goods like pharmaceuticals or food or electronics, you can dramatically reduce the amount of waste that happens during the supply chain, when the supply chains are not ensured that like say like COVID vaccines or electronics, if they get too much humidity or whatever. So there's a lot of food, electronics, and pharmaceuticals that get thrown away. And when I say a lot, we're talking about 30 to 40% of all the food, pharmaceuticals, electronics a little bit lower, it gets thrown away because you can't be safe if you don't have the data. Then obviously, and COVID vaccines were very, very a clear case of that. There you had a matter of life and death, not just like some rotten bananas or whatever. So that's a company that's not necessarily a climate tech company, but if you can prevent 30 to 40% of stuff being thrown away, that's still energy that's being used to create new stuff. And so why would you throw it away?
Exactly. Kind of the climate impact could be massive if the companies are growing. If you look at the kind of startup field across this region, you mentioned you are seeing an uptick of companies working in the climate related topics. Could you kind of go a bit deeper with that? Is it something more specific, something in specific sectors or specific countries?
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe to answer that, there are two ways investors look at it, depending on what your focus is as an investor. So there is a way to look at it from a holistic ESG perspective, which means looking at the whole society and knowledge and health and the environment, which is often stuff that happens inside those companies. Are these companies run in a sustainable fashion from all the aspects of ESG? And then the other side of that coin is the stuff that they're making, whether it's digital or physical or both, is the stuff that they're making, what is their impact on the society? And we look at both at Nordic Ninja because we are partners for in a system called Upright, the Upright project in Finland, which has a Google-esque approach to benchmarking all funds or companies, whatever you're doing, from an ESG perspective. And then internally, we are using our own methodology to measure the company's product's impact on the domain. And so there are clearly companies that are looking at this in the same way, whether they are investors or just startups. So you have companies that are looking at sustainable investing, right? So you have like Greenfin, and you have a massive amount of kind of energy is going towards moving atoms, as we say at Nordic Ninja. That moving atoms means moving people, moving goods, and so when you move atoms, we have, by the way, I think about 40% of the capital allocated in our fund so far is into reducing the amount of energy that is spent on moving atoms, or getting rid of moving atoms altogether, like in the case of Veriff, which is an exceptional. So that's one area. The other one, obviously, is related to health and food. These are two separate things. Normally, when you look at people talk about food tech and digital health, but since we are in this smaller market of 8 countries, we look at it like in the same way. It's like, who are those teams? So that there's a very large portion of companies trying to tackle that. There are companies that are doing traditional stuff. Like one of my kind of ways to think about things is that, I don't eat meat, right? But I know that obviously a lot of people eat meat, and they will be eating meat in the next decades to come, even though that is going to be reducing in terms of percentage share. They still will do that. So if we are going to have people eating meat, it should be done as efficiently as possible. Like, what if there was a way to reduce methane emission of cows like 80%? So you get like 1 kilo of beef with 20% of the energy that is compared to what is it today. Of course, I would support in doing that, even though I don't eat meat, right? It's still net impact. Or like forestry, there's like a lot of energy being spent. Like if you think about it, we're still using wood, right? For whatever reasons. Yeah. If we reduce the amount of wood being used, that's important. And that's obviously what Single Earth is doing. Like, let's keep the forest where it is. It's biodiversity, it's everything. We obviously understand that. But then you still need to take down trees. Okay, what is the efficiency of taking down trees? It's super low. It leaves massive marks and destroys. There's tracks. And what if there was a way to make that efficient? And so you see companies trying to do that. And we're not obviously experts in that, but we are interested in stuff like that. And at least I am not an expert in forestry, but I'm just saying that if you look at the whole value chain, you look at the different steps needed. So single earth is in that portion of the forestry. Well, let's keep them where it is. But then for the trees that are still being cut down, we should do that as efficiently and as with as small footprint as possible, right? So it's the whole thing. You have to look at the whole thing. And in the mobility sector, we are moving atoms sector, so to speak. We are doing the same, looking at value chain. So we have a company like Einride in Sweden, which is making autonomous electric trucks. That was the first company in Europe to be allowed on public roads. So that is an incredible company. And then on the other side, you have the last mile with Starship, which is also a portfolio company. So which is kind of like mini Einride, small robot deliveries, autonomous deliveries, last mile on sidewalks or pavement, as British English would say. So that's how you would look at it, and I think there's still a lot to do in digital health, but we haven't seen like unicorn cases there.
There's this middle layer still missing, probably, that the goods would be that you would get the goods from the Einride to Starship without any humans involved in the process, right? Yeah.
I mean that is still something that humans need to deal with. Obviously, there's too much complexity, right? So that's where like Climate View helps, and like one of my favorite things there is that there's this world famous industrial designer Dieter Rams, and in his documentary there's this bit where he's asked at some fireside chat in Munich from a question from the audience is like, hey, why haven't you designed any cars? I would love to have, and this is in Munich, right? So like car mecca, and everybody has a BMW and whatever, and so why haven't we seen a Dieter Rams designed car? And he's like, yeah, but cars are stupid. Like you have kind of overcompensated, overdimensioned the vehicles that go too fast, and instead we should design better public transportation infrastructure, or if there were like pods or whatever, they should be moving autonomously, or all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely like a thing that we need to figure out. And one of the powers of digital infrastructure and all this data is that we can actually spend more time understanding and simulating and making the right decisions, instead of, we just invented this stuff, it's cool, let's do it, and then 5 years later, oh shit, this is not going to work. So I obviously, and this is something that I say all the time, is that there is to be this futurologist or futurist, James Martin in the UK. He's passed away now, but he had this cool quote that I liked, which was that in the 20th century, humans figured out a way how to invent stuff and bring stuff to life. We're very good at that. That's what separates us from other animals, is that creating tools. But in the 21st century, the main theme should be about control, meaning that we can now control. We already know that we can come up with anything or build anything we come up with, but now the decision has to be made. It's like we need to be very careful, what do we bring into this world, because we can bring anything into this world, and whether we bring chaos or harmony, that's up to us. So that's why we like stuff that is helping us to make better decisions. So that's what Climate View does. And then of course there's this big topic, which is measurable but over a longer scale, which is health. Like, we are living in a era of aging societies, right? Not exactly a climate tech thing initially, like on the face of it, but if you're bedridden, if you're sick, let's say live to 100 years old, and their last 30 years are kind of rubbish because you haven't been able to live normally. So one of our portfolio companies is called Combinostics, and this is the most complicated company we have, a deep tech company. They're taking your brain MRI and are able to predict the risk of Alzheimer's. And they do that by analyzing your brain MRI scan against the whole world's brain MRI database, anonymized database. And if you do that early enough, you can prevent or take steps to prevent Alzheimer's. And that type of stuff is still in its infancy, but if that becomes a thing, we, like men today, take a PSA test, right? Women might take a mammograph when they're 40 or earlier even. We are not making these brain MRIs yet, but in an aging society, the percentage of people with Alzheimer's is increasing, and that's a massive amount of carbon. If you put it just all on paper, it's a bad way of life, and nobody wants to live like that and finish their life, obviously. But it's also a massive burden, and nobody wants to be a burden, of course. So if we can figure that out, that will be massive. And there are a host of all sorts of health issues that we need to deal with that are related to aging society.
Absolutely. You were talking about the ESG in relatively positive terms, and earlier you were speaking about how you were born with a great bullshit filter. Don't the ESG topics often run into your bullshit filter?
Yeah, we see a lot of. I mean, we have a great deal flow at Nordic Ninja, and we see. How do I say? I mean, the fact that it's in the society's consciousness is good, but I sometimes feel like people are, well, maybe some people are using it to greenwash and all that, but generally startups are just trying to show that they care. But sometimes when you have a company like the brain scanning company that I just explained, you don't have to explain on every slide, that you're like a climate tech company or like how you're reducing carbon footprint. That's obviously important, but I think everybody understands that if you're doing something worth doing, like brain scanning for predicting Alzheimer's, nobody's gonna, So we see this increase in marketing copy, and that's doesn't bother me because I see through all that stuff because of my experience. But there's let's say this way: as humans, we have not still figured out how to do this properly. We've seen all sorts of ways to measure this. There are tools like World Favor that are kind of mostly kind of manual entry tools, which are very good. But then there's companies like Upright, which are more Google-esque approach to measure this. And we don't even know how to measure it. And clearly we need to, reduce, reuse, recycle, as the saying goes. But we all have to make changes. And so some of these changes can be started on a grassroots level, and some of these changes can be started on policy level. So there are only so many things an individual can do. But smart policies are also needed, and if they are made in a very good way, in a concise way, then you can engage with people. Sometimes I feel that we're stuck with kind of like labels that we need. Like you can see this polarization, right? There are certain topics, like when you say climate change in some political circles, it will immediately get red flagged because it's sort of like the enemy, right? And like the funniest example, and I'm sorry I'm digressing, but the funniest example is that after Trump's victory in 2016, when he came into office, January 2017, I was on a bus tour in West Virginia with the Atlanta Council, and we went to Virginia University, I think, was one of the stops later. We met with the group that was doing community solar in coal country, and you have people that are voting for coal jobs, but they have solar panels on the rooftop. So with their wallets and with their brains, they're voting. Obviously, this is normal because the levelized cost of energy of solar panels is way lower than anything else that they had available. But they're still, voting for coal jobs and politicians that are promising giving false promises. So you have that issue, and I think we need to figure out a language and an empathic understanding how to do that better. Otherwise, we're going to drown in all this BS.
That's a sad future picture for many, probably. You were talking about the politics, and I know we are close or soon running out of time. I wanted to ask you about the kind of European energy transformation. With the current war and the pressure on the kind of fossil fuels across the Central Europe, how do you see the kind of interest maybe in the alternative energy startups, and is this the kind of what's the chicken doing the golden eggs thing in the near future?
Yeah, so this is again a lesson in strategic thinking. This Russian war in Ukraine. Obviously, people on the eastern flank of Europe, bordering with Russia, don't need to be reminded of this. We are the ones that were kind of the boy who called shark, and nobody listened. And now it's like, we told you so. But there are hard choices. It's not black and white, obviously. So for some northern countries, you can't say that everybody should go over solar and wind, and we are happy. We need to solve the energy storage question. That means we need to use rare earth metals. We need to make some hard choices when it comes to nuclear versus coal. Germany obviously, backfired in that sense, and many other things related to geopolitical choices with gas and Nord Stream, which is a horrible, horrible way to run stuff. So, but I think in general, I'm still an optimist. I in general think that technology is a way of doing things. And so technology is the only thing that will actually change the world. And politically, you can incentivize that, as we have done this in Estonia, or you can be against it, right? But generally, politics is reactionary in its nature. But I'm still very optimistic that Europe is still the best place for clean tech. Europe is still the best place to talk about clean energy, and we can figure it out rather easily. We don't have that many disagreements as maybe in other sectors, and we can afford it, right? Because it is expensive to adopt new technologies, and the cost of those technologies will come down over time. That's the whole essence of it. So, but that doesn't mean that we have to say no to nuclear, especially when we think about modular nuclear that can be made safer. The old nuclear reminded of the old waterfall way of developing software. You can the iterations or the innovation iterations were too slow, and now we have to do something different. But I think if the choice is between coal or gas and nuclear, then we have to do small modular nuclear, and then maybe down the road we can figure out to go full solar or something. There's going to be an energy mix. There's not going to be one single source of energy, obviously. And then the storage portion of it is super important, obviously.
Cool. That's somewhat more positive note to wrap up this podcast recording. Thanks, Rainer, for your time today.
Thanks, Tarmo. And let's keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Join us again for the next episode. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, please give us a good rating and leave the feedback in your podcast player so others will find it too. We will be back next week. Turn on to Nature Backed Podcast.
Hey there, it's me, DC, and I want to tell you about the Hard Rock and Metal Station, heard as part of the Autolus radio family at Autolus.com. What do we play, you ask? How about Five Finger Death Punch,
Slipknot,
The Who, Pantera,
Godsmack,
Slayer,
Disturbed,
Attila,
Korn,
Beartooth, Ghost,
Fear Factory,
Metallica,
Breaking Benjamin,
and so many more. Hear us on the Autolus app or at Autolus.com/rockcast.
I could tell she was a dame who normally knew what she wanted.
I'm looking for something interesting.
But when it came to podcasts, she was lost in a fog. That's where I come in. The name's Guide, Podcast Guide. I'm the community search engine for podcasts, and I knew I could help her navigate the murky waters of podcasting and find the shows that fit her style.
Can you keep it down? A girl's trying to listen to a podcast here.
Head to www.podcastguide.us and let's solve this mystery together.
Electricast.